IDW Sonic is the current and still ongoing iteration of the Sonic comics, and they're really good. Even though I've made it clear I have a preference for Archie, especially the era of 2006 to 2013, the IDW comics are still very near and dear to me, and I look forward to every monthly release. And one of the best elements of IDW are all the new characters introduced in this comic. And this is directly reflected in how Sega uses these original characters. The fact that we're getting to see them in official merchandise, appearing in the mobile games, and getting name dropped in the main portions of the franchise. So needless to say, these characters are pretty important right now, and will probably only become more important to the future of this franchise. So we're going to go over all of them. I feel like this is a good way to both give you all a clear idea of who these characters are if you see them in a future game or other piece of media, while also giving a primer on all of these characters if you want to jump in at a more recent arc of the comic, or even just the most recent issue. We don't all have the time, patience, or ability to read over 50 issues of a series, so even though I think IDW Sonic is worth picking up at the beginning, I completely understand and empathize with someone who's going to jump in right now at the current issue. As usual, I will timestamp each character so you can effectively use this video as a visual encyclopedia. The Sonic games do not have enough characters. I'm sure someone just burst a blood vessel. Let me explain. The Sonic games do not have enough characters to support the type of story that comic writers have historically wanted to tell with him. This goes back to Fleetway, Archie, and even the manga, and this makes sense. It's not even just needing villains that aren't Eggman. If you think about similar styled comics that have an ongoing plot but are pseudo-episodic and often switch perspectives between storylines, they have a lot of characters filling a variety of different roles. So each Sonic comic has offered a fair bit of new characters to the franchise. And that's definitely the case for IDW, which is what I'll be covering next. I won't be covering characters I've already done, but I'll probably throw them in the compilation video. Tangle the Lemur is a character in the IDW Sonic comics. She first appears in issue 4, teaming with Sonic and Blaze to defend her home village from badniks. She is shown to have a stretchy, prehensile tail, which she uses as her primary mode of combat. Her personality is also shown to be very excitable and impulsive, sometimes not fully thinking through her actions. She meets the rest of the Resistance/Restoration in issue 9 when she is recruited to do battle with Neo Metal Sonic, where she is shown to get along with everyone fairly quickly, though the strongest relationship she would develop would be with Whisper the Wolf. We'll talk in more specifics about their relationship a little later. From this point, she becomes a mainstay of the comics, even providing one of the primary emotional beats for the Zombot arc. After that arc, she's shown assisting the Restoration, but she leaves it both because she finds the job a bit too restricting for her and so that she can reunite with Whisper, with the two finally reuniting in the most recent issue. While she is primarily considered a team-up partner for Whisper, she has been depicted teaming with others, one of my favorites being her incredibly brief team-up with Rouge. Most notably, she's one of the few characters who debuted in the comics to make a jump to the games, not only being playable in the app games, but getting name-dropped in Sonic Frontiers.
I bet Tangle would love climbing around these ruins.
Whisper the Wolf is a character who appears in the IDW Sonic comics. First appearing in issue 8, she was a member of an anti-Eggman force called the Diamond Cutters, before the majority of the team met an unfortunate fate. Her main ability is proficiency with Wispons, the weapons the Avatar character would utilize in Sonic Forces, with Whisper having a special prototype model that can switch abilities rather than be limited to one. I've seen a couple people ask this question when they first find out about her, so I want to answer it preemptively. She's not meant to be the Avatar character from Forces. When Whisper is first introduced, Sonic makes it clear he has never met her before, though it is stated she was active during the events of Forces, mostly during the time when Sonic was captured, where she gained the nickname Guardian Angel of the Battlefield, gaining a reputation for saving people at the last minute. As she suffered a major tragedy with the loss of her team, she starts the comic very closed off, only opening up over time due to the persistent friendly nature of Tangle the Lemur, going from being totally uncomfortable with physical contact to initiating it herself. However, at some point later on, she does leave the Restoration, feeling that her being around puts Tangle and everyone else in danger. Though after coming into conflict with Surge and having to get help from Sonic and Tails, she has returned to being around her friends. Whisper also is playable in the app games, and while she hasn't been name-dropped in the games like Tangle yet, both her and Tangle do have official plushes. This probably means Sega has an interest in using her beyond the comics. Tangle and Whisper's genuine relationship is definitely one of the highlights of the IDW comics. They are first seen interacting in issue 12 and seem to get along very well, with Whisper apparently feeling comfortable enough to tell a joke to Tangle even though she feels uncomfortable telling it to Sonic. Tangle very quickly wants to introduce Whisper to her other friends, and Tangle is the first person Whisper is able to open up to about her past. Whisper is absolutely distraught when Tangle is infected by the metal virus, yelling for the first time in the comics, and is overjoyed when she's cured. When Whisper leaves the restoration, it's for Tangle's safety, and Tangle leaving the restoration is with the explicit purpose of reuniting with Whisper. It's very easy to read their relationship as romantic, and that's by design. Both Evan Stanley and Ian Flynn have talked about how much they like this pairing. Ian Flynn going as far as describing their first date on his podcast. He's also outwardly stated on his podcast that it's their intention for their relationship to be read romantically. The only reason they haven't been unambiguously stated to be together is that Sega doesn't want to go into depth with any romantic relationship. However, this is something they've been lightening up on, so this could change one day. Jewel the Beetle is a character who appears in the IDW comics and is a longtime friend of Tangle the Lemur. She was first introduced in the 2019 annual and is the victim of an accidental kidnapping after she was assumed to be an actual gem by the Babylon Rogues. In this, she's shown to be much more shy and conflict avoidant than most characters of this franchise. She's given a minor role in the Tangle and Whisper miniseries before being given her own solo story in the 2020 annual called The Catalyst. In this story, she shows that she too can be heroic under pressure as she endeavors to save a group of children during the Zombot outbreak. While she initially appears successful, it's revealed near the end of the story that some of the children had gotten infected, resulting in her being turned as well. She would also be the one to go on to infect Tangle. After the outbreak, upon seeing how overwhelmed Amy is by running the restoration, Jewel offers to take over her administrative role, as she has a passion and proficiency in that type of work. She's shown to flourish in her new role, though she might be overworking herself a bit as it appeared to be a struggle to convince her to take a break and go on a camping trip with the other characters. The Diamond Cutters were the anti-Eggman force Whisper was a part of prior to the events of both Sonic Forces and the IDW comics. In addition to Whisper, the team consisted of Smithy the Lion, Slinger the Ocelot, Clairvoyance, and Mimic the Octopus. The team proved to be very effective at battling badniks, which unfortunately would have them gain the full attention of Eggman. On a mission to one of Eggman's bases, Smithy, Slinger, and Claire would be betrayed by Mimic and meet their ends at the hands of dozens of shadow androids, Whisper only surviving as she was posted outside. The event would leave Whisper with both a serious case of survivor's guilt and a personal vendetta against Mimic. In issue 57, a new version of the Diamond Cutters has formed, as Tangle suggested the name to refer to the team of her, Whisper, and Lanolin, as a tribute to Whisper's old team. Tangle clearly meant well, but Whisper is clearly not completely on board with the idea. You can't really blame her. No one's going around naming cruise ships the Titanic too. Wait a minute. Mimic the Octopus is a villain that appears in the IDW comics. Initially a member of the Diamond Cutters, he betrayed them after being paid off by Eggman. Whisper, the only other survivor of the team, swore revenge on him. As his name suggests, Mimic has the ability to completely change his appearance and voice to match another, inspired by the real-life species of the Mimic Octopus. His personality is shown to be exceptionally cold, as he felt nothing when confronted with the memories of those he betrayed. He's shown to be incredibly treacherous, his only true loyalty to himself. After escaping following his capture and subsequent arrest by Tangle and Whisper, he too swears revenge on Whisper. We haven't seen him since then, but the fear of him being out there caused Whisper to leave the restoration, fearing for their safety. Lanolin is a character who appears in the IDW comics. Initially appearing as an extremely minor and unnamed character as early as issue 2, her consistent background cameos, paired with her shifting wardrobe, becoming more combat-oriented over time, suggest a present yet unseen character arc with a fairly convincing theory that she was traumatized by the Zombot plague and the near destruction of the ski lodge she had been staying at, as after these events she's depicted as much more detached and standoffish. Issue 57 is the first time we've gotten to see her in a lead role. In this issue, she's formed a rapid response team against Eggman. She tells Sonic that he inspired her to join the restoration, but the comic also draws purposeful parallels between her and Whisper, another traumatized character, as well as her being critical of Sonic's tendency to act impulsively and recklessly in the face of potential danger. This all lending a lot of weight to the theory of her being traumatized. Clutch the Possum is a villain who appears in the IDW comics. He's a leader in organized crime, whose base of operations was centered around the White Park Chow racing circuit. His main business is the underground trafficking of badnik parts and weapons. Rouge, Amy, and Cream come into contact with him while attempting to obtain repair parts for Omega. During this time, it's discovered that he keeps his Chow in abhorrent conditions, which greatly enrages Shadow, who then takes out his frustrations on him. He then manages to escape while everyone is distracted, while also activating his badnik guards. Following this, he comes into conflict with the Chaotix, as it's found he's still in the business of trafficking badnik parts and weapons. While the Chaotix do manage to sink his operation, literally, he does manage to escape once more. The concept of a street-level Sonic villain is one that really works, and I think could really only be accomplished in the comics. It opens up a lot of different story opportunities, especially for characters who aren't Sonic. Mr. Tinker is a character who appears in the IDW comics. More specifically, he's a version of Eggman that appears in the IDW comics. After the events of Sonic Forces, Eggman disappeared. In actuality, he ended up in a small town named Windmill Village with absolutely no memory. From here, he took up the persona of Mr. Tinker, a kindly repairman and toy maker. Sonic and Shadow and pretty much everyone are highly suspicious of this at first, believing it to be an act, but after Sonic sees him protecting children after robots wander into town, and Shadow sees Tinker's version of Eggman land, they decide to leave him alone. This wouldn't last, however, as Tinker would be kidnapped by the villainous Dr. Starline and be put through reconditioning in an attempt to restore his old persona. While that doesn't work, the sight of Metal Sonic does jog his memory, causing him to become Eggman once more. The most interesting thing is that he not only intimately remembers his time as Tinker, but he seems to miss it. Belle the Tinkerer is a character who appears in the IDW comics. She is a wooden badnik resembling a marionette that was created by Mr. Tinker and was considered to be his daughter. She went into hiding after Starline transformed Tinker back into Eggman, staying inside an abandoned Eggman base. Sonic, upon meeting her and thinking she's a threat, does immediately attempt to destroy her, though this does eventually smooth itself out. After helping free Clutch the Possum's Chow, she also helps Tails in repairing Omega, with Tails noting that Belle was able to read Eggman's blueprints, which have always been written in a strange code that he had to decipher, and asks if she was built by him, which she denies. This forms the basis of her first major arc, where she's unwilling to come to terms with the fact that Eggman and Tinker are the same person. She joins up with the Restoration and shortly after comes into contact with Eggman, breaking down after it seems like Tinker is truly gone for good, her only comfort being the thought that Tinker would be proud of her. Then she is kidnapped by Dr. Starline as he wants to study her design. During this, Starline reveals that he was responsible for turning Tinker back into Eggman and leaves Belle an emotional wreck. She gets a vacation after that, which in some ways is just as traumatizing as her other experiences. She later finds a farewell letter from Mr. Tinker written while he was captive by Starline, in which he does say he loves her and always will. This helps Belle come to terms with the fact that Tinker is truly gone. She even confronts Eggman, telling him directly that she's moving on. Weirdly though, Eggman shows a bit of leniency with her, despite having the option to destroy her in that moment, offering her a position as his mechanic or just allowing her to walk away. So he may still harbor some fond feelings for his daughter. Also notably, they've teased some almost sibling-like relationship between her and Metal. While their most recent interaction was Metal knocking her aside to get to Sonic, he did still hesitate, so I'm led to believe that this is something that will be developed further. Dr. Starline is a villain who appears in the IDW comics. He is a scientist who idolizes Eggman and wants to apprentice to him. In order to do this, he kidnaps Mr. Tinker and puts him through reconditioning to restore his Eggman persona. After he succeeds in this, he becomes the assistant to Eggman after presenting him with the Chaos Emeralds he collected. However, this isn't the dream team Starline hoped for, as Starline is confounded by Eggman's decisions, and Eggman grows frustrated with Starline making his own decisions that almost result in Sonic's destruction. After Starline contacts the Zeti, unwittingly putting them in control of the Zombots, Eggman fires his assistant. Starline plans to get back at his mentor by proving himself superior, first teaming up with former Eggman associates for revenge, and then kidnapping a Tenrec and Kitsune and performing forced biological modifications on them and wiping their memory, creating Surge and Kit. He eventually confronts Eggman but is thoroughly defeated to the point that he has a nervous breakdown, allowing himself to be crushed beneath rubble, with implied fatal consequences. Now, we never see his fate directly, and anyone who reads comics knows that characters are very rarely gone for good. The Warp Topaz is a powerful gem that appears in the IDW comics. Wielded by Dr. Starline, it has the power to open warp portals and create one-way dimensional windows to view another location. The interesting thing, as opposed to the Chaos Emeralds, the Warp Topaz requires an external charge to function. However, the power it needs is very little, and anything greater than that can result in it warping reality. When first presenting the gem to Eggman, he elects to not use it in his plans, as he says he's had his fill of strange new magic stones, clearly learning his lesson from the Phantom Ruby. though the Topaz is then used to rid the world of the metal virus, Super Sonic and Super Silver using the energy of the Chaos Emeralds to power the Warp Topaz to create a large portal directly to the sun, destroying the virus completely. However, the charge from the Chaos Emeralds is too great, which caused a large explosion, which ended up sending Sonic to Blaze's dimension, and the Warp Topaz's location is now unknown. Interestingly, Ian Flynn said on the Bumblecast that the original plan was for the Warp Topaz to be destroyed at the end of the Zombot saga, but Sega specifically requested that the Warp Topaz not be destroyed, so we may see it in the future. Sonic is pretty much a celebrity in his world, so it's no surprise he'd have fans, and the IDW comics feature that with the Sonic Fan Club, a group of children who live around Spiral Hill Village who idolize Sonic, and they are a staple of the IDW annuals at this point. Their first appearance in the 2019 annual sees the formation of their club and starts an argument over who should be club president, after which they decide whoever is most like Sonic should be club president, at which point they start a race with one another, after which they bump into a badnik and begin fighting it, because that's what Sonic would do. Tangle shows up to help and says they should have a Tangle fan club instead, but accidentally ties herself into knots while Sonic zoomed past and defeated the badnik. Two members of the club then appear as the children Jewel is rescuing in the 2020 annual, with the rest of the fan club seemingly being turned into zombots. As I mentioned in the video on Jewel, these characters unknowingly get infected, resulting in them also infecting Jewel. Finally, in the 2022 annual, they appear alongside Cream at the Hero Camp to learn to be more like Sonic. The camp, however, is turned out to be run by Cubot and Orbot in disguise, in an attempt to gather intel on the Restoration and Sonic. After it's revealed they are imposters, Cream leads the fan club in a rebellion against them, tying up Cubot and Orbot. These are neat little side characters, and I'm looking forward to seeing them again in the 2023 annual. Ruff and Tumble are a pair of antagonists from the IDW comics. This duo of skunks had saved the village of Barricade Town during the events of Sonic Forces with their combined strength. However, instead of moving along after Eggman's defeat, they decided to take over the village and exploit it for their own comfort. Sonic and Knuckles work together to kick Ruff and Tumble out of the village and arm the villagers to protect themselves. From here, Ruff and Tumble basically function exclusively as a tool for other villains, like working for Dr. Starline to kidnap Mr. Tinker, and later working directly for Eggman. Eggman even uses them as the initial means to spread the Zombot virus. They've most recently been seen working for Clutch the Possum. When they do solo work, they seem to be focused on stealing treasure and have formed somewhat of an unintentional rivalry with Rouge the Bat, as she's frequently shown playing a part in foiling their plans. Can you believe this arc happened almost 3 years ago? The metal virus was a plague developed by Dr. Eggman. More accurately, it's nanobots that are set to roboticize any organic material it touches, with any completely roboticized individual only given the direction of spreading the virus further, which is why Sonic aptly names them Zombots. And you heard correctly, any organic material, which includes grass, which is a grim vision we're shown when Silver first returns to the present. Zombots are also invincible, as while their bodies prove fragile, like typical zombies in media, they quickly regrow their missing parts. Sonic actually gets infected at the beginning of this arc, with the only thing staving off full infection is him running at full speed, which delays the process and reverts it slightly, though never completely curing him. This creates an interesting dynamic where Sonic is at the point of exhaustion by the time this storyline concludes. It definitely leans into the dramatic tropes and more emotional impacting bits of zombie media, while also adjusting it appropriately to fit in Sonic's world. It's a good story to the point that even 3 years on I'm hesitant to go in depth with it because it's worth reading, and I would rather people experience it themselves for the first time. And this is an idea that had been cooking for a while, as Ian Flynn revealed on the July 8th, 2019 episode of the Bumblecast. The metal virus was originally intended as an Archie plotline for some time after issue 300, but as we know, Archie's mainline Sonic series stopped at issue 290. Nite the Owl and Don the Rooster are a duo who appear in the IDW comics. Nite is a radio host and is loosely based on comic book writer and radio host Clint McElroy, while Don simply helps out around the studio. They first appear in the 2020 annual, where Nite wants to keep his show on the air during the Zombot virus to provide moral support to the people, while Don wants to escape. Nite is emboldened to stay when a member of the Restoration calls into the show and asks Nite to read survival instructions on repeat. Don then can't bring himself to leave Nite behind and stays to barricade the studio. The duo then appear in issue 48, babysitting Charmy, and then give giving a tip about Clutch the Possum to the rest of the Chaotix. Nite also makes a one-panel cameo in the classic Sonic story, Sonic Learns to Drive, fitting for a story written by the McElroy brothers to include a character loosely based on their dad. Also, Nite the Owl and Don the Rooster are in a romantic relationship, as confirmed by writer Evan Stanley on Tumblr. The reason this is an exception to Sega's general no romance policy is that the fact that they are a couple was included in their character bios they were pitched with, so it sidesteps the policy by making the relationship features of the character. Kip the Capybara is a character who appears in IDW's Sonic 30th Anniversary comic in the story Sonic Learns to Drive, written by the McElroy brothers. He's a driving instructor who Sonic refers to as the best in the business. He crosses paths with Sonic when Sonic attempts to get his license to compete in a race where the grand prize is a lifetime supply of chili dogs. After Sonic terrorizes the road with his poor driving, Kip threatens to fail him, after which Sonic begins to drive much slower and actually follow the rules of the road. Until it's revealed that Sonic got the date of the race wrong and he speeds off towards the track. It's then revealed that due to an Eggman attack, the race has now been postponed. At the end of the story, it's revealed Kip has now gained an enjoyment for speed and encourages Sonic to drive off a ramp to get to Eggman. Surge is a character who appears in the IDW comics. At some point, she, as well as a Fennec, had been kidnapped by Dr. Starline and had been biologically augmented as well as had their memory wiped. She had been created with the intention of destroying and replacing Sonic. In addition to being fast, she also had electricity-based powers. She also had a tendency to think of herself before others. Eventually, she discovers what Starline had done to her and Kit, and upon finding that Starline did not make any documentation of who they were before this, she flies into a rage. Deciding if she can't have a past, then those who robbed her of that can't have a future. She decides to play along with Starline for the moment, as she feels if it had not been for Sonic and Eggman, this would have never happened to her and Kit, ergo they are just as responsible. Her and Sonic finally confront one another face to face in issue 50, where Sonic makes a poor attempt to talk her down. In their fight, they get separated by falling debris, Sonic assuming Surge didn't survive. She did, however, finding an old Eggman invention known as the Dynamo Cage, which supercharges her electricity. However, it also causes her to begin hallucinating visions of Dr. Starline despite his apparent demise. She then ends up confronting Whisper, resulting in her being further charged after capturing her wisps. In her fight, though, she accidentally renders herself unconscious after a huge energy blast. Kit then rescues her. Sonic and Tails make a temporary truce with Metal and Eggman to confront Surge and Kit. In their search for the two, the group discovers just how they came to be, the tragedy of the situation fully dawning on Sonic. During their fight, Sonic makes another attempt to talk Surge down and insists that she can be free, to which Surge responds that as she was created to live in Sonic's shadow, there's no freedom for her while Sonic is still alive. The Dynamo Cage then goes critical and explodes, rendering her unconscious, at which point Kit escapes with Surge once more. That's the last appearance so far, but we're definitely going to see more of them. Kitsunami the Fennec is a character who appears in the IDW comics. Like Surge, he was kidnapped by Dr. Starline, had his memory wiped, and was cybernetically enhanced against his will. He was given the power of hydrokinesis, meaning that he can control water like Magneto controls metal. To ensure he always has access to his ability, he's outfitted with a backpack filled with water. During his reconditioning, he becomes totally dedicated to Surge, always wanting to look out for her. Unlike Surge, he's not as invested in the idea of eliminating their counterparts, as Tails actually manages to talk him down during their fight, though they return to fighting once Tails suggests partnering with Sonic, as that would be impeding Surge's goals. After everyone assumes Surge met her end, Kit partners up with Sonic, Tails, and Belle, wanting to be helpful to them like he was for Surge. Kit really doesn't take the news of Surge's apparent demise well, immediately retreating inward. But when he hears Sonic is in danger, he immediately leaps to help, not wanting to lose him too. When Kit arrives to the fight and sees Surge, he believes Sonic lied to him and assumed he was trying to finish her off. He quickly retreats with the injured Surge for her protection, and the two make a new plan to take out Sonic, Tails, and Eggman. During their second battle, Tails manages to talk Kit down again, but when he sees an unconscious Surge, his grief consumes him, leading him to attempt to bury Sonic, Tails, and Eggman alive. This is the last we've seen of him so far, but we'll definitely see him again eventually. Scrapnik Island is a location in the IDW comics. The island holds the remains of the Death Egg, as well as a population of broken down badniks. Despite their horrifying appearance, the vast majority of the island's inhabitants are friendly, given a second chance at their existence by E100 unit E117 Sigma. And while even though they are scary at first, I think a lot of these robots definitely fall in the definition of ugly cute. This is a really solid miniseries, and I highly recommend it, especially for new readers to the comic. It's a nice little isolated story that you can enjoy without a lot of prior knowledge to Sonic, but also packaged with tons of things for you to enjoy if you're a longtime Sonic fan. I think it's got something for everyone. A while back, I actually did an interview with the writer of the miniseries, Daniel Barnes, before the miniseries came out. He was really cool to talk to, and I recommend checking out that video. But even more than that, I recommend picking up this miniseries. E117 Sigma is an E100 unit that appears in the IDW Scrapnik Island miniseries, and is currently the newest E-Series unit to be explored in any Sonic media. We don't know much about his time working for Eggman, as the earliest we've seen Sigma is him waking up on Scrapnik Island. As E100 units have always been a little bit more cognizant, Sigma recognized he was abandoned by Robotnik and thus turns his back on the Doctor as well. He sets out repairing his fellow damaged robots, including Mecha Sonic, and forms a society with them. He's shown to be friendly to both Sonic and Tails, and really just wants to do the best for his fellow badniks. There have been theories that Sigma is the green E100 unit from the Gimme Shelter in Sonic Battle, as well as the fact that there is another E117 unit in the Sonic DLC for LEGO Dimensions that I can't tell the color of due to a combination of the lighting in the room and the fact that my vision struggles with certain colors. Thank you for watching. I'm continuing to post videos daily on TikTok, and if you want to support me, you can do that through my Patreon. It really helps me out. I want to give a shout out to my current patrons, Ned Rex, Tentacle Teapot, and AJ Wigglesworth. See y'all in the next video.